The rule of law of the Supremacy Clause stated Article 6, Section 2 of the Constitution Act of the United States. This Constitution and the laws of the United States, which shall be made in pursuance thereof, and all treaties made, or which shall be made, under the authority of the United States, shall be the supreme law of the land. So here it's teaching us that the Constitution of the United States of America is the supreme law of the land. And any law that is made is supposed to follow the operations that are found within the Constitution. This is the same operation of law that is transpiring in Canada, in the Constitution Act in Canada. We look in Article 52, right? And it reads, the Constitution of Canada is the supreme law of Canada. Well, we just read that the Constitution of America is the supreme law of America. And it says, and any law that is inconsistent with the provisions of the Constitution is, to the extent of the inconsistency, of no force or effect. So here we see the operations of law are the same. They're the same in Canada and they're the same in America. The Constitution Act is the supreme law of the land. The Constitution Act is the supreme law of the corporate body. U.S. reservations, declarations, and understandings. International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. That the United States understands that this covenant shall be implemented by the federal government to the extent that it exercises legislative and judicial jurisdiction over the matters covered therein, and otherwise by the state and local governments, to the extent that the state and local governments exercises jurisdiction over such matters. So here we're reading and we're learning, right, that America and the states had the obligation to implement the rights and freedoms that are brought forth, that are enumerated within the covenant itself. It goes on to say that the federal government shall take measures appropriate to the federal system to the end that the competent authorities of the state or local governments may take appropriate measures for the fulfillment of the covenant. So we're seeing the obligation rests upon the federal government, on the state governments, and on the local governments. They all have accountability to the rights and freedoms found within the international covenant. Well, why did America do this? Why did the United States of America sign on to this covenant? And why do they have the obligation now to bring forth the rights and freedoms that are enumerated in the covenant? Well, because the covenant itself put the legal obligation upon America. When we look into the ICCPR itself in Article 2.2, it says we're not already provided for by existing legislative or other measures. Each state party to the present covenant undertakes to take the necessary steps in accordance with its constitutional process and with the provisions of the present covenant to adopt such laws and other measures as may be necessary to give effect to the rights recognized in the present covenant. So when they ratified the ICCPR, an obligation fell upon them, and they had to adopt laws or they had to produce other measures for all the people, all the individuals, all those in the United States of America, that they would be able to exercise their fundamental rights and freedoms. They had the obligation to give effect to the rights that are recognized within the covenant. And that's why they do it. And that's why you see the Supremacy Clause. And that's why you see this reservation of declaration and understanding concerning the international covenant. Because they were legally bound. They were under authority to do so. So they went ahead and they implemented their obligations under the international covenant, just like they were legally bound to do. But they did a little side action. They did a little side work there. And they didn't let anybody really know. In the U.S. reservations and declarations and understandings concerning the covenant, right? In Article 3, it says, the Senate's advice and consent is subject to the following declarations. That the United States declares that the provisions of Article 1 through 27 of the covenant, all our substantive laws or provisions, are not self-executing. So they didn't say they don't exist on the land. They didn't say that you're not allowed to operate them. But what they said is they're not self-executing, which means that they don't operate They have no benefit for you. You can't use them unless you claim them, unless you stand under them, unless you execute them. So they made your fundamental rights and freedoms in America not self-executing. And they put the responsibility upon the individual who would come to learn and understand about what rights and freedoms they have, what natural rights and freedoms they have, and the obligation that United States has towards them concerning these rights. If you woke up to that fact, then you could go about executing them, exercising them, calling upon them, living under them. But if you never woke up to the fact, then these rights are not self-executing, and there'll be no benefit for you. You won't find the benefit in law, and you won't find the benefit in the judiciary, because you haven't claimed them, and they don't just automatically operate. If they made my rights not self-executing, and they stripped them from me, and they picked my pocket, that means I got to get up, and I got to do something, right? I got to tell this party here, I got to tell this executive party that what they did to me was wrong. I got to give them a notice of my understanding and my intent, right? To execute all my individual fundamental natural human rights and freedoms, which are set forth in the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. The ICCPR and the subsequent expressions in the Supremacy Clause in the Constitution of the United States provides the measure and the operation of law for anyone to express their natural rights and their full legal capacity despite public law. So the operations of law are present already within the legislative law, within the Constitution Act. But they went and they put a wall there. And they said, well, these rights that we have an obligation to, they're not self-executing. And only those who claim them, and only those who stand under them and execute them, will we have to recognize. And will we have to produce a remedy for them. And in our notice, and in our communication with these wicked people who love to strip us of our fundamental rights and freedoms, who love to limit and abridge our human rights by magic words on a paper, and operations of law created on a paper that bypass their obligations. Well, within the context of that, right, we see what we're saying is that we understand that there's natural law. And this natural law, right, it exists not from legislative or judicial actions. It exists because of a physical principle, or a principle of nature, or a God-given right. But nevertheless, there's natural law that's in operation. And this natural law is not created by the legislative or judicial branches of the government. And I'm just letting you know that I'm aware of that fact. In this natural law that exists, there are natural rights available for me to stand on. And a natural right is a right that is conceived as part of natural law, and that is therefore thought to exist independently of rights created by the government or society, such as the right to life, liberty, and property. And within that natural law right, I have inalienable rights. I have rights that cannot be transferred or surrendered. And one of those inalienable rights are a natural right, such as the right to own property. And I have absolute rights under natural law. And these are rights that belong to every human being. You see, your natural rights, your inalienable rights, your absolute rights, natural law, it's all been hidden from you. It's all been put behind a wall of the ICCPR, the International Covenant. And America, what they did is, they said, okay, well, these natural rights, these absolute rights, these inalienable rights that you have, well, we're not going to make them self-executing. We understand we have the obligation. We signed upon the covenant, and we can read, and we know we're supposed to let you operate these rights, and we're supposed to allow you to choose if you're going to operate as a statutory creature, as a driver, as an owner, as a student, as a fisherman, as a gun holder, or if you're going to operate in your natural capacity as a human being, or some like to say a man and woman. It's no difference. Stop writing me and telling me, well, don't call yourself a human being because it just means the color of man. You're lost. Don't understand what you're reading. You don't understand what you're discerning on the paper. A human being is just another way of saying man or woman. It doesn't, you don't lose your full legal capacity when you call yourself a human being. You don't lose your full legal capacity when you call yourself a man or a woman. But you do when you call yourself a driver. You do when you call yourself a patient. You do when you call yourself a consumer. But those wise people up there sitting in the legislators and those wise people up there in the executive government, they decided that, you know what? We're just going to treat them as a class of person. We're just going to treat them as statutory creatures. And if they ever find out, and if they ever wake up to the game that's being played on them, well, there'll be a measure there for them to use. They'll be able to execute their rights. So, in turn, we're fulfilling our obligation to the covenant because we're allowing these rights to be exercised. And the covenant said we have to provide a measure, right? That's what it said. And when you read the supremacy clause, it talks about a measure. A measure. Well, what's the measure they're talking about? What are they trying to say? Well, the measure they provided in America is if the light bulb goes off in your head, if the alarm bell ring in your mind, and you realize, hang on a second here, I'm a man, I'm a woman, and I have natural rights, I have inalienable rights, I have absolute rights, but I'm not functioning under them. I'm not operating them. I'm not exercising them. The government controls me in all my actions. What's going on? Why is it like this? Why is law like this? You might begin to realize that not all law is like that. Not all law operates in that way. What you're seeing and what you're waking up to is legislative law, statutory law. And that law is created to restrict you and control you. But fundamental human rights and freedoms are in operation to free you and liberate you. I claim my fundamental rights and freedoms, my natural rights, as found in the Constitution of the United States. And I know, now I know, they're not self-executing. Oh, you write them all over the place. I find them in the Constitution, and I find them in the state constitutions. But I woke up, and I understand. Those natural rights, those fundamental rights and freedoms that you were supposed to allow me to exercise, you limited and abridged them, and you made them not self-executing. So now I'm giving you my notice and my intention to execute them, and to exercise them, and to use them, to stand under them, to live under my full legal capacity. And there's 50 states in America, right? And you expect me to go and bring all 50 states in this video and show you the same operations of law? I did it. I checked. I have them. But I ain't going to put them all on the video. It'll take me an hour just to do that. But let's look at evidence codified in Indiana Code 3437 1.5. Certificates or instruments, either printed or written, purporting to be the official act of a notary public of the state or of the District of Columbia or of any other state or territory of the United States, under the seal and signature of a notary public, shall be received as presumptive evidence of the official character of the instrument and of the facts set forth in the instrument. So you want to know why I keep saying I claim? You want to know why I keep saying I claim this, I claim that? Well, here you go, right? It says that if you make a document under an official act of a notary public and you set forth what's transpired against you and what's transpired against your fundamental rights, and you set forth all that you've learned and all that you understand about America's obligation to the international covenants, about how they ratified it and signed upon it and put it into the Constitution and said they had an obligation to respect these rights, but then turned around and closed the door and made a new operation of law that said, well, your natural rights and your fundamental rights, they're not self-executing. They're there, but they're not self-executing. And if you're going to use them, well, you're going to have to claim them. And if you're going to claim them, you're going to have to first know that they're there. And so we're hiding them behind this door. So you never find out that they're there. But if you set forth your facts in this instrument and have a notary public seal it for you, well, then you're telling them that I'm choosing to execute my rights. And they are no longer non-self-executing for me. I don't know about Mary. I don't know about Bob, but I know about for me, because I'm choosing to exercise them, and I'm telling you, and I'm giving you judicial notice, and the obligation is upon you to allow me to stand under my full legal capacity, to stand as a human being and not as a statutory creature. Looking into Florida, the state of Florida, and this operation of law that you find in court goes all across the 50 states of America and the federal court itself. But we're talking about in Florida, the code title number 7. And look what it says: compulsory judicial notice upon request. A court shall take judicial notice of any matter in section 90.202 when a party requests it. Well, your matter is contained therein. And it says if you furnish the court with sufficient information to enable it to take judicial notice of the matter. A lot of people go to court, right? And they walk in there in America and they say, oh, I'm a man. I'm a free man. I'm a sovereign citizen. Ding dong, you're wrong. You can't be a sovereign citizen. If you claim to be a citizen, then you're under the authority. You're a subject and you're a servant. And you can't be sovereign because the very definition of sovereign means that you have an army to defend your territory. Have you ever looked in the definition of what sovereign means? You have to have a military to defend your territory. You can't go before the court and say, I'm anything else but what? But a man or a woman, exercising natural fundamental human rights and freedoms. And if you go to the court, right, without having told them, without having notified them who you are, and not just with a letter saying, I'm a man, take recognition of me, but saying, I have these rights. They exist in international law. The whole world's basically recognized them. What? That I'm a man or a woman, that I'm a human being. And when I was born, when I came into this world, I have natural rights. I have human rights, and they exist. And it doesn't take a government to tell me I have them. And the government is not supposed to remove them from me or limit them from me. And that's who I am. And this government here, America, it had an obligation to respect my rights. It signed upon the International Covenant of Civil and Political Rights. And within that covenant, there are expressions of my fundamental human rights and freedoms. And they're supposed to allow me to exercise them here in this territory. And they never did. Worse than that, they made these laws that stopped me from exercising my rights. They made these laws that said your natural rights are no longer self-executing. So if I come to court here and I stand before you and I say I'm a man and I say I'm a free man, and I don't recommend using those terms ever. You say you're a man. You don't need to qualify I'm a free man. You're a man. But if you go to court and you tell the court I'm a man, I'm not my birth certificate, I'm not a citizen. Well, does the court say that what you're saying is self-executing? No, it's not, right? And you think by saying those words to him, he has to take judicial recognition? He has to realize what you're saying? No, he doesn't. Why? Because what you're trying to say is not self-executing before him. And the only way that you can get the court to recognize, or any executive power to recognize what you're trying to say, is by first you claim it in a document, like they do to you. When they send you a document and they sign their John Hancock on it, whether it be for taxation or property tax or a ticket, whatever it is, they send you a document and they give you a legal notice. Well, before you get to the court, that's what you got to do with your notary. Claim your rights back. Claim your rights back from the executive government and what they've done to you. And then if you ever have to go to court, you have that claim with you and you give judicial notice to the court. Well, who's coming to court? Not a statutory creature. Who's coming to court? Not something that the law created, but something that was born into existence with all his or her fundamental rights, human rights and freedoms. That's who's coming to court. And I'm giving you notice, judicial notice now, and I'm providing you the information. And that information, again, is enumerated and listed. The obligation is in international law. It fell upon America. They executed it, but then they hid it by making it not self-executing, not allowing me to exercise my right. But I took them back, and I held them to their obligation. And now I'm before the court for whatever the reason may be, and I'm here under my full legal capacity. The court will never recognize you. The court won't recognize your rights in that capacity until you furnish the court with sufficient information to enable it to take judicial notice of the matter. Now, that's important, right? Sufficient information. It's qualifying the information. It's not saying any type of information, but sufficient information. And the information has to lead the court to take judicial notice of what you're trying to say. Well, then you got to build your claim up in the laws. You got to use the laws and point to what they did and show the judge what they did and catch them in their action. And then you force judicial recognition on the court. So we find in the United States Constitution, the Ninth Amendment, it says the enumeration in the Constitution of certain rights shall not be construed to deny or disparage others retained by the people. Okay, what other rights? What are you talking about? You just said that we have certain rights. And then you said the other rights that we have, well, you're not going to deny us that we have them. Okay, well, what are you talking about? You didn't explain anything to us. Why are you talking in code? Why are you talking in secret? Why are you saying things that don't really make sense? Unless I have to go on a hunt through here, and a hunt through there, and a hunt through that, and a hunt through this. What are you trying to hide? And you look in the Canada Charter of Rights and Freedoms, Article 26. We have the same expression of law. The guarantee in this charter of certain rights and freedoms shall not be construed as denying the existence of any other rights or freedoms that exist in Canada. Okay, so both our constitutions, right, are saying, well, what we're listing here in the Constitution, it's only certain rights. What we're listing here in the Constitution are not all of your rights. And if you happen to find some other rights in operation out there, well, the Constitution is not going to deny that you have the right to operate them. So if I looked to the Constitution of America, right, and I looked for the expression of the ICCPR, Article 1 through 27, those ones that say I have no obligation to contribute based upon the principle of mutual benefit. Those ones that say I have no obligation to enter into recognition as a statutory creature and that I can't be held in servitude. If I look for those in operation in the Constitution, will I find them or will I not find them? No, they're behind a door, right? So I have to go before them and say, hey, I have other rights that you're not looking to. I have other rights that I can stand under that you took away from me. So you see, they do it on purpose. They know what they did when they created these documents. They know what they were doing to us. America's more deceptive than Canada. Canada put all our operations of law within domestic law, within constitutional law, or within direct communication with the ministers. But America went and closed the door on the people and said, this knowledge you're not going to get. This understanding you're not going to get. If you find it, it's because you're going to go for a hunt. If you find this, it's because you're going to be looking for it. All right, so let's talk about one natural right. Let's talk about a fundamental right that we all have, that was expressed in international law, and that was under obligation to find its way into America or into Canada. Article 1.2, right, of the International Covenant says, all peoples may for their own ends freely dispose of their natural wealth and resources, without prejudice to any obligations arising out of international economic cooperation, based upon the principle of mutual benefit and international law. In no case may a people be deprived of its own means of subsistence. That's the law. That's what was articulated. That's what was enumerated for us. And it talks about the peoples. And the word people here, in this article of law, it doesn't refer to a depository of people that form a government. It refers to individuals. It refers to those in their full legal capacity. That's what it refers to. And it says, under your full legal capacity, you can freely dispose of your natural wealth and resources. And you have no obligations to any principle of mutual benefit or any international law. And it says, in no way, in no case, may a people be deprived of its own means of subsistence. Well, what is that saying? What does that mean? Well, you go out and work, right? And you get a paycheck. And the IRS hits you a good one and takes away from your means of subsistence. That's what you did, right? That paycheck is your means of subsistence. It's how you buy your food, how you buy your clothes, how you pay your bills. But yet they come and they take a part. They come and they remove a part of that away from you. And they say you have an obligation. And they say it's based upon the principle of mutual benefit. But when you look into international law, it says you have no obligation to give a part of that away based upon the principle of mutual benefit. And there's no operation of law within the international covenant that allows them to force you to do so. There's none, and they know it. Now, for those who already know the covenant, right, my Canadian listeners, and perhaps some of the American listeners, I'm going to throw something here at you, and you're going to see how sneaky they are. Remember how I said that America was very deceptive, right, in what they've done with the law. Well, they say Article 1 through 27 of the ICCPR is not self-executing, right? And within Article 1 is where you find this article of law, where it frees you from having to contribute based upon a principle of mutual benefit. But they took that and they put it behind that door that I talked about. But if you go down to Article 47, that right is re-enumerated. It's listed again in Article 47. And that Article 47, they did not hide behind the door. Okay, so if they didn't hide it behind the door, then when I looked at the laws of the IRS, and when I looked at the laws of the taxing authorities within the government bodies, I should be able to find an operation of law, right, that allows me to exercise what I'm reading here. I may not be aware of it. I may not be able to find it. But according to their obligation, right, if they didn't hide Article 47 behind the door, then Article 47 put an obligation upon them. And they had to make a way, a means for them to tax people while still fulfilling the obligation of Article 47. And I can't go in deep into that in this video, because that's going to be a video for another time. But if you understand and you know about the covenants and you know about the restrictions that they placed in America, Article 1 to 27, but yet they left Article 47 out. So you have the same natural right that's in operation under Article 47 as you do in Article 1.2 of the ICCPR. And again, it says that you can freely dispose of your means of subsistence. That's your right. That's my right, but that's your right also. You can freely dispose of your means of subsistence without having to give any obligation based upon the principle of mutual benefit. So let's see now how America set up their taxation system. Let's go see what they did. Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution of the United States of America, it reads as follows. The Congress shall have power to lay and collect taxes, duties, imposts, and excises, to pay the debts and provide for the common, defense, and general welfare of the United States. Are you hearing that? Provide for the mutual benefit of the United States. So they implemented a taxation system, right? And from the commencement of that taxation system, right, they're going against the obligation of international law. And they're saying that we're creating a taxation system that's providing for the common and general welfare of the United States. It's based on the principle of mutual benefit. That's what this taxation is based upon. But yet you have no obligation to contribute to a system based upon the principle of mutual benefit. You're not bound. You're not bound according to law, according to the international covenant, to give away your resources for the common good of the United States. But yet that's how they set it up. And you know, in doing so, what did they do? They took away your natural right. They took away your natural right. You have money in your pocket, right? It's your choice who you want to give it to. You have money in your bank. If it's your choice who you want to give it to. But they told you no. You have to give us a part of what you make. When you go out and work and you create a means of subsistence, well, you owe us a part of that. Why? Well, because we're going to use it for the common good. And you have no choice. That's what they said. Or that's what they told you. That's what they told you. I'm going to look into the Income Tax Act here in Canada right now. And these operations of law, right? Let me tell you, America is doing the exact same thing. The legislators in America are doing the exact same thing. It's not like they were so intelligent, right, that they could do it differently in each different countries. Oh, they use different words. Yeah, that's right. And they use different codes. But the operations of law are still the same. And if you know what to look for, and if you know what you're looking for, and you can search the codes and their laws, you'll find it. You'll find it. And when you find it, you find a treasure. You find a treasure for yourself. Now, here in Canada, liability for tax. It says tax payable by persons resident in Canada. Article 2.1. An income tax shall be paid, as required by this Act, on the taxable income for each taxation year of every person resident in Canada at any time in the year. Article 2, subsection 2 says the taxable income of a taxpayer for a taxation year is a taxpayer's income for the year. All right, so many people call themselves a taxpayer. I'm a taxpayer. But we have to go back up, right? And it says that an income tax shall be paid on taxable income for who? For every person. And some people want to argue that person and say, oh, I'm not a person. I'm not that person. But the qualification here is not the person. It's where the person's located, right? You never caught that. You never seen that, right? Tax payable by persons resident in Canada. Well, the person has to be resident in Canada in order to be a taxpayer. And how do you become resident in Canada? What does it mean to be resident in Canada? Hey, the courts have already determined this. Listen to this. It says residents pay taxes, not citizens. Whoa. But residents within the definition of the enactment. So you see how they play with statutory law, right? And these statutory creatures. You have the Supreme Court. You have the judge declaring that it's not citizens that pay taxes. Well, don't you consider yourself a Canadian citizen? And don't you use that excuse to yourself? I've heard it. I've heard it from individuals. Well, I got to do my part as a Canadian citizen. For the mutual benefit of us all, I got to do my part. You know what you are? You're brainwashed. You're deceived. They put that into your head. They made you feel that as a Canadian citizen, you have to do your mutual benefit and pay a contribution. When the courts have said, citizens don't pay taxes. Citizens don't pay taxes. Residents do. But residents within the meaning of the enactment. And to be resident in Canada, well, what does Canada mean? It's a corporate body. Corporate body. And to be resident in Canada means that you're in their corporation. And you're operating as an officer of that corporation. Now, the ins and the outs of it, I'm not going to tell you. I'm not going to reveal here on this video. But that's what they're declaring. So forget about what type of person you are. You're a taxpayer, right? And forget about what type of person you are. Because you can be a doctor. You could be a lawyer. You could be a driver. You could be a cook. You could be a CEO. You could be any numbers of this class of person. You could be any kind of this class of person that's also considered a worker. But that doesn't matter. What matters is, are you resident in Canada? That's what matters. Because the court said that if you're found to be resident in Canada, then you owe a tax. Then you have taxable income. So the problem is not with the person and not with the definition of taxable income. The problem is with the definition of what does it mean to be resident. Now, when you go to Article 153 of that same enactment, and look what they're doing. And wake up. Every person paying at any time a taxation for salary, wages, or other remuneration. So anytime your boss is about to issue your paycheck, anytime you're about to pay yourself, right? They say there has to be a withholding applied against that. That's the taxation. They shall deduct or withhold from the payment the amount determined in accordance with prescribed rules, and shall at the prescribed time remit that amount to the receiver general. Okay, you made $1,000 this week at work, or $10,000 this week at work. But 30% to 50% is coming off the top of that. It's going to be deducted. It's going to be withheld. and it's going to be sent to the receiver general. And look what the law says. We're at the prescribed time. The person is a prescribed person. The remittance shall be made to the account of the receiver general at a designated financial institution. So who's being taxed here now? They don't tell you, right? They don't say, right? They don't say that you're a taxpayer. They don't say that you're a person. They say we're at the prescribed time. The person is a prescribed person. Doesn't tell you what is the prescribed person. Who are they talking about? What is the prescribed person? Does it mean a doctor? Does it mean a lawyer? Does it mean a police officer? Does it mean a judge? Does it mean a minister? Does it mean a delegate? What does it mean, a prescribed person? People, some of the lawyers, these guys who think they're so smart, right? When they come to this, they don't even see what it's saying. They don't even understand what it's saying. And they've come across my video and ding, 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 the light bulb's gone off in their head. And they realize what's going on. You mean, what? I'm not being taxed as a Canadian citizen. I mean, I'm not even being taxed in my occupation. I'm being taxed because I'm a certain prescribed person in this enactment. And that prescribed person is what? It's the resident. It's the resident in Canada. The one who's been made an officer of the corporate body. And you know what the law further says? Once you go into that office, once you're hired into position, well, that's when the obligation to get your social insurance number comes in. Because that's when you're the official officer of the corporate body of Canada. And that's your employee number. Just like all you smart guys, you know, in the States, they like to take on the cops and say, what's your badge number? What's your name? And the cops got to say, here's my badge number. And good for you, holding them accountable. But just like they present a badge number, guess what? Well, when you get your social insurance number, that's your badge number. That's your agent number of the corporate body. And that's why within the Income Tax Act, it puts a requirement on you. Hey, when you get a job, when you're hired, you got to go get a social insurance card because that's your agent number. And that's how we identify you as the officer of the corporate body. And this same operation of law that I just shared with you, maybe it was hard for you to wrap your head around. Maybe it was too much for you to get, and that's okay, I understand. They did it on purpose. They do this on purpose to us. But this same operation of law that's transpiring here in Canada, that's the exact same thing that they're doing in the United States of America as it pertains to taxation. The exact same operations of law are what they are using. And why? Why do they take us out of our full legal capacity? Why do they place us under the capacity of a statutory creature? And in this one, that being resident of Canada, that being the officer of Canada. Why do they put us in that capacity before the law and then apply a withholding against us? Why don't they just say, okay, well, you're a man or a woman, and then we're going to take your money away from you? They don't say that, right? They jump through all these hoops in their enactments, right? Every person who's resident, taxable income, taxpayer, prescribed person, at the prescribed time. Why do all that? Why you do all that? Because you know what you've done. Because you stopped us from exercising our fundamental right and freedom, our natural right to our resources. And you put us into a position of being a statutory creature. And upon that statutory creature, you applied those laws. And you made it so complicated and so difficult that people can't defend. And people don't understand what's going on. Besides throwing up their hands in the air and saying, why do they have the power to do this to me? Well, because they've made you an officer in their corporate body. And they're not telling you how they did it. And that goes for America, and that goes for Canada.